Hello, everybody. Today I'm back with AC Lang. A few weeks ago, we talked about the She Believes Cup, previewing and talking about how we think Canada is going to do. Today, we are wrapping up the She Believes Cup. AC, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
You
Pretty
good?
good. It's we got we got a lot of learnings I think from this tournament. Off field, on the field, it was definitely a unique window. Definitely feels like one of the more like dark and heavy windows that we've had in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, we had to start off our World Cup year, and we have to get better at the things that we need to improve at.
Definitely an interesting window with learning lessons, but a lot of learning lessons that do have a big cloud ahead of them. If you guys are unaware, Canada Soccer is cutting funds for the women's national team. The women's national team threatened to strike, rightfully so, as obviously their funding is being cut and they're not being paid. The federation said if you guys are striking, then we're going to sue you. So the players had to go into the She Believes Cup and play. So we must bear in mind that the three games that the players did go for camp in, they didn't really want to play and were in the nicest way possible. They were forced to go on the pitch. With the whole conversation that AC and I are going to have today, we must bear in mind the circumstances and the situations around everything. So let's start off with the US. The US game, that was the opening game for Canada. Not the best start to Canada. They went down pretty early. There was somewhat of a ball watching moment. 20 minutes later, they were hit with another goal. Came into the second half a lot more structured, a lot more defensively tight. That first game, what did you see? What didn't you see? Those two goals, that first 20, 30 minutes, it really wasn't Canada playing very uncharacteristically odd mistakes. What did you see in that game?
Yeah, I think the first game was really the hardest one to take any kind of sporting conclusion from. There had been so much build up off the field in the lead up to the game that there was just a lot of pressure, I think, when that first whistle blew.
Mm,
The first 20, 30 minutes were really emblematic of that. We looked just steamrolled really by the States, who had had a window prior to this. So they
mm.
they were playing their third game already this year, and they just looked so much more energetic, so much more focused, and they really brought it to us in the first like 30, 40 minutes.
Mm.
After that, like you said, we did catch ourselves, but the mistakes kind of continued. I think that was a theme for most of the game. Just as you said, uncharacteristic mistakes from like our top players, like Lauren, Buchanan, Gilles. Those people usually don't make mistakes, and so those directly led to goals against the States, and then we just kind of struggled to find any kind of offensive solution.
Yeah, that momentum was pretty much killed. And the three players that you mentioned are all full back players. So obviously Buchanan and Gilles are one of the highest rated duos in the back. If you put them together on a good day, I mean, it's a hard pair to break down with Lawrence on the side as well. She's been consistently performing at a top level, always shows up whenever she's paired up with these two on the side. Doesn't really fail to hold her position, has good pace, can track back. And against the US, she does have some really good showings. Is it concerning that those three in the back, would you say, didn't have a good game? And is it time we start wondering maybe those pairings shouldn't, we should start experimenting, or was it simply the pressure of the game and what was roaming around the game that possibly pushed those mistakes?
I think they just got tired really early because they had to defend for 25, 30 minutes straight. And so once you're already tired as a defender, it kind of those mistakes will creep in. As well, our possession was abysmal. So immediately, if they did win the ball, we lost it again. And so they were kind of on the back foot all game. So it's hard to look good as a
Mm,
defender when you're on the back foot like that.
mm,
In terms of the quality of those players, I'm ultimately not that worried. I think they'll figure it out and they'll pick it back up. Um, but realistically, as you mentioned, we did see some new combinations throughout the tournament in the back line,
mm.
and so that'll be. We probably went into the tournament thinking, okay, this is pretty set. We know who's going to start, and we left the tournament not as sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a positive in some ways because in a World Cup year, Bev has already mentioned that this is going to be an insanely competitive roster. And it's good that we have these questions of, wait, we thought exactly which players we were going to take, specifically in the back line. And since we're talking about the back line, we got to talk about J Rose. Saw Jade Rose start that Brazil game. The second game, she had an incredibly great game. That game we won 2-0. It was also Janine Becky's 100th cap, the 19th Canadian player to do so for the women's national team. An incredible accomplishment for an incredible player like herself. Specifically, I think it actually was more iconic the fact that she did this in this tournament, given what's going around. Would you say?
Yeah, yeah, Janine Becky. I mean, what a story on and off the field. Like she's really kind of leading this whole charge, and she's been very vocal. She's connecting with Becky Sauerbrunn. She moderated that national team player call, and so she's been really in the limelight.
Mm,
Plus the 100th cap, and so I thought she actually did pretty well in the first and the second game. She dropped off a little bit in the third, but yeah, what a backdrop to get that milestone. Not probably the context that she wanted to get it in, but it's
yeah.
the one that she's got, and she's still leading the way, and it's impressive the way that she's doing that.
Yeah, probably wanted to do on a happier note, but it kind of adds to her whole story of, battling it out for the team and doing it in such a tournament. But back to Jade Rose now. I mean, what is showing she's only had just under 10 caps for country, but has already gone up against some of the best attackers in the world. Last year we saw her do it against Sam Kerr. Not an easy player at all. I mean, plenty of defenders struggled day in and day out to defend against her. Jade Rose had some, I mean, really, really impressive stuff this time around against Brazil. You look at the Brazil attacking forwards, I mean, it's terrifying. And she was calm, collected, vocal, fast. I mean, what do you talk about her? She booked that ticket into the World Cup essentially.
Yeah, I think with her position change, she actually became even more invaluable to Bev because I think we saw that she can play as a fullback, even though she wasn't necessarily trained in that position and she is very good central. Now that we have that option for her as a fullback, it's going to get even tighter for players like Gabby Carl or Bianca St. George to slot into this team, and even Alicia Chapman has to also worry about her starting spots because she has Lawrence ahead of her, Riviera ahead of her, and Rose probably equal to her at this point.
What makes her so good? I mean, we talk about one, we just mentioned how flexible she is going from that central position to the fullback position. She's quite tall, quite physical, but what really puts her ahead of, let's say, Carl or Chapman, who's a veteran of the squad?
Yeah, I think she has the cerebral qualities that either of those players don't necessarily have as naturally. Chapman and Carl, they have to grind it out really, they really have to grind it out each game. Whereas Jade Rose, you kind of feel she's just like floating around the field and she's just naturally in the right position. And
Mm,
then you add on top of that the physicality, the speed, the strength, as you mentioned. She just has that ability to anticipate where the ball is going to be. And even when she does get caught, she's able to catch that player again. And so she kind of reminds me of Buchanan actually.
yeah.
Even in her, like how calm she is on the ball. I know she had a few moments where you wish that that pass was a little bit more precise, but I think that will come as she becomes more familiar with these teammates. Because you got to remember she played most of last year with the U20 team, so
Mm.
she's just a generational talent. I think she's the next best teenager that we had. We had Sinclair as a teenager, we had Fleming as a teenager, Heidema. The next one is Jade Rose.
Definitely in that line. And in that game, we won that game. Speaking of Fleming, she was on the set pieces. This is another thing that we saw Bev kind of change up this tournament. Usually and routinely, it had been Janine Becky. I think personally, Fleming on the set pieces looked really, really positive. Even in the US game, some of the deliveries that she had on the corners were a lot more precise. In the Brazil game, that proved to be pivotal. Both of the goals that came in were from set pieces, both delivered by Fleming. Fleming, not only is she so precise with her deliveries, but Becky as well. She's so good on her movement around the box that she draws in bodies, moves different players around for marking, where it opens up those spaces for her teammates. She's also, I mean, significantly taller than Fleming, which is not a hard thing to do when you're competing with height and Fleming. But what did you make of this whole idea of Fleming taking on set pieces pretty much every single set piece when her or Becky were on the pitch? It was her, not Becky.
Yeah, like you said, last year was kind of between the two, but based on this performance, I think Fleming has definitely worked to establish herself as the primary set piece taker.
Yeah.
Especially the corners I found were a lot better than Becky's were. I think Becky can hit them, but she just doesn't hit them as consistently. And you really have to give credit to the set piece coach that Bev hired last year, Jen Hurst, because as you look into the World Cup and who wins tournaments, you inevitably get to set pieces because they're such an important part of how teams score goals at tournaments. And so if you think about our height, we have the options to really attack in the box with Vanessa Gilles, with Kadisha Buchanan, even Sinclair, Heidema, they're all in the air. And so as long as Jesse keeps working on those deliveries, I think we'll have a few goals in us in the World Cup as well.
Yeah, set pieces are always kind of like the dark horse or the cheat code of any tournament. But that does kind of raise another concern that is consistently a concern is our struggle to score from open play. We didn't really score many goals in the She Believes Cup this time around, but I wouldn't say we really had significantly dangerous chances from open play.
Yeah, for me, it definitely was disappointing how few shots on goal we really created. There was a few moments of threat through Becky, Lacasse, a few others, but realistically, we were not dangerous from free play. And I think that comes down to one, probably missing a few key players. I think it is important to mention that, Deanne Rose and Michelle Prince, they do create a lot of havoc when they're on the field.
Yeah.
With their speed, and they have a lot of understanding with those players up top because they've been playing together for so long. As you mentioned, we did try a few different combinations. We saw Hellstrom in the US game. We saw Leon get her minutes in. We saw Larissi. We saw Lacasse. Again, Heidema. They all got their minutes. And so no one really was clicking that well, in my opinion. And then you also have to touch on, ball retention and balls into the final third, because I thought we were retaining the ball at times, but we were not really able to play that incisive pass. And if you look at some of our players at the club level, they play higher up in the midfield. They play as eights or tens, whereas with us, they're playing as double eights that are sometimes stuck back there a little bit. And so we're not really unlocking the final third with Grosso and Fleming the way that we could be.
Yeah. Speaking of that pivot, playing the double eights, that was quite abysmal also in the Japan game. Not the best way to close off the She Believes Cup. It was a 3-0 defeat, a penalty, and then two open play goals, sorry. It was Fleming and Grosso for start in the pivot with Sinclair ahead of them. You've mentioned we've seen these two have a ton of time together. I think it's simply not working, and I don't think it's going to work. We obviously didn't have the luck of having Desiree Scott. She's nursing an injury. Quinn was out with an illness, so obviously those players are very defensively minded. They offer a different idea of stabilizing that midfield, and specifically with Scott, she's a leader, so she leads that midfield. She dictates how she wants the players to be around her. So not only did we lose that leadership bit, but we lost that defensive bit, and I'm not sure Grosso and Fleming really is the players that need to be playing behind Sinclair. Fleming typically plays a 10. When she has been in the 10, she's phenomenal. I mean, that's really when you get the best Jessie Fleming. Grosso is perfect behind her or even up with her. You can even argue having a Quinn behind with Grosso and Fleming up top. That works really, really well because Grosso is able to connect between the boxes. Quinn can stabilize, and Fleming could be engaging forwards as well as dropping because she's just so good and her work ethic is insane. What do you think about that midfield, those pivots that we've constantly come out with that simply aren't working? And also Sinclair didn't look at her best shape this competition.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the nail there. The way that we're setting up our formation now is to incorporate Christine Sinclair into our team. And because she didn't play well, that didn't turn out too good either. She made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of turnovers, wasn't really able to regain possession as much as you would have hoped. And so, as you mentioned, we were really missing a player like Desiree Scott and Quinn specifically. And so that was another bummer of this window, is that we didn't really get to answer any more midfield questions. I think that's another part of the team that, we're leaving the competition with more questions than when we went in. Because as you mentioned, I think a lot of people want to see Quinn anchor that midfield to really let Fleming and Grosso fly.
looking at the current roster, looking at some of these players that you're definitely taking into the World Cup. Say Sinclair is not going to be getting the minutes that she usually would be getting simply because of the competition and the talent that there is on the roster. But also, you can't deny that age is obviously catching up to her. It does to everybody. Who'd you reckon, or who'd you put is going to be kind of that next leader on, or that next person to really have that armband and start leading on the team?
I think we've already seen it with Jessie Fleming this window. She always gets the armband from Christine, and she always has to tape it up because she has tiny arms. But I think between Fleming, Becky, Buchanan, Lawrence, it's really their team now. I think we're moving into an era where the 95s are really running with this team, really leading the team. And so the $1 million question for Bev will be, how do we incorporate Christine Sinclair? How do we still get the best out of her? Because I think she is still there for a reason, and she's obviously coming to the World Cup. So we need to find out what her best role will be.
Mm.
In terms of, if anyone else is going to join this roster, it's really, really tough with the 23. And so I'm sure we'll discuss that too. But I think it's close to set now, the roster.
Zadorsky. Giles got a bit of a rest in that last game. Buchanan and Zadorsky. Is that your go-to fullback? I think there was a lot of, or sorry, go-to pairing. I think there was a lot of issues with covering. I'm not sure if they've got the exact chemistry that we need. Obviously, it's one that you definitely work on. But I mean, what did you make of it, especially looking at the mistakes that they, not just them, but the overall defensive mistakes that they had in the Japan game?
Yeah, personally, I'm a Zadorsky fan, just in terms of her personality, her leadership off the field. But I gotta say that, especially in this last game, it's probably not going to be those two. They do have a lot of familiarity
Mm.
because they spent a lot of time before Gio came on the scene playing together, and so it wasn't for lack of familiarity. I think it was just poor positioning on that first goal and lack of foot speed in combination and lack of coverage. To be honest, there was only two players back there, and they were on the wrong side of the field. And so I think Zadorsky, unfortunately, probably showed that she will not be the starter, or that she did not earn her spot back from Gio.
Japan on the other side, I mean, incredibly patient, such good possessional play, so accurate with their passes. And that's exactly the team that we needed to come up against and test ourselves. And in some ways, you learn more in losses. Now, in the April window, we're obviously not sure if we're going to play. A lot of the players have said that if these issues are not resolved, they're willing to strike and not play and jeopardize the World Cup. Obviously, this is a fair fight, understandably so. But not even thinking about the April window, leaving this window from the pitch, what are the main things that you look at and you're like, right, this is exactly what we need to fix moving forward?
Yeah, things that we need to fix. I think we need to fix our front three, or at least figure out who our best front three are going to be.
Mm.
I think we need to figure out our best use of our top quality midfielders, Grosso and Fleming. And I think we need to figure out how we can get our defenders back in better form, because that was very out of character of them. And
Mm.
so those would be the three main questions for me. Also, with D'Angelo's injury, you're looking at goalie depth now, and there's
Yeah.
some serious questions there because McLeod is gone. Poole doesn't have any games. Kerr doesn't have any games. There's a few decent keepers, but they don't have any experience. And then lastly, again, I think the $1 million question is, what's Christine Sinclair's role on this team now?
$1 million question indeed. 100%. I think you pretty much put on the perfect criteria that needs to get figured out for the next few months. Whether they play or not, these are questions that need to get looked at closer. I think there's enough. I hope there's enough footage that can help answer some of these questions. Obviously, it was a tough competition, like we just talked about. But that goalie depth is definitely a question that not a lot of people are thinking about. But now that you mention it, that's a serious one. Hopefully, though, D'Angelo is all nice and well. Speaking of Sheridan, though, she did get nominated for the MVP. How good is Sheridan? Let the people know.
Yeah, there's one area we don't have any questions. She is definitely one of the best goalies in the world. Snubbed for all the awards last year. I'm gonna go
Yes.
ahead and say that.
Yep.
But yes, she's an incredible shot stopper. Certainly, she has her nervy moments. with the ball, but we can forgive that if she saves, 4 goals a game. So that's one question that, is crystal clear. Kellen Sheridan is going to be the starter at the World Cup.
There you go. That's just like that. We're ending on a good positive note. But uh make sure you guys follow AC on Twitter. She does exceptional work, like you've already seen, I hope, covering Canadian women's national team players across the globe in Europe. I mean, everywhere. She's got you covered. Contracts, games, where to watch. She's got you covered. Yeah. Any final words?
Oh, thanks for having me. Really, really love talking about She Blues Cup.
Always. I'm sure you'll be seeing AC on the channel every time there's a Canada conversation to be had. Definitely we'll keep you updated on what's going on with the Federation. Hopefully only positive news moving forward. Thank you.